Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Charles Darwin University's Casuarina campus. And to those of you joining us online, welcome to the 2022 Nugget Coombs Memorial Lecture. I acknowledge that we are on the lands of the Larrakia, and I pay my respects to Larrakia elders past, present, and emerging. And I thank them as custodians of this land for over 60,000 years, for the deep and ongoing care, connection, and respect they maintain with country, and importantly, acknowledge that their sovereign lands have never been ceded. My name is Professor Ruben Bolt, and I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, First Nations Leadership and Engagement here at Charles Darwin University, and I'm a Yuin man from the southeast coast of New South Wales, from a little community called Wreck Bay, which is about 3 hours drive south of Sydney, and I'm delighted to be your MC this afternoon. The Nugget Coombs Memorial Lecture is co-presented in special partnership between Charles Darwin University and the Australian National University every 2 years. I warmly acknowledge our friends from the ANU that join us here from Canberra today as special guests, our Acting Vice-Chancellor Sam Jacob, other distinguished guests, both in person and online, and I welcome you all to today's lecture. It now gives me great pleasure to invite CDU's Larrakia Academic in Residence, Auntie Billawara Lee, to the stage to give us a welcome to Larrakia country. Thank you, Anna B, for those beautiful words and for that warm welcome. I'd now like to introduce Professor Ian Anderson, AO, Deputy Vice-Chancellor Student and University Experience from the ANU. Professor Ian Anderson is a Palawa man from the northeast coast of Tasmania with traditional ties to Tebrukana country. Before taking up his position at ANU in March 2020, he has extensive experience in the leadership and delivery of student services at the University of Melbourne, and 2 decades of work in the development of pathways and academic support for Indigenous students in higher education and academic support across a range of disciplines, especially medicine. He was appointed Deputy Secretary of Indigenous Affairs in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet in 2017 and was Deputy Chief Executive of the National Indigenous Australians Agency. He has spent most of his professional life working in Indigenous health and education, and graduated as a doctor in 1989. Professor Anderson was awarded his PhD in 2006 and became an officer of the Order of Australia, AO, in 2017. So please make Professor Anderson feel welcome.
Thank you, Ruben, Professor Bolt, Acting Vice-Chancellor Sam Jacob, and everyone at Charles Darwin University for the very warm hospitality that you've given us, and for this important tradition of the Nugget Coombs Memorial Lecture. I also wanted to extend the greetings of our Vice-Chancellor Brian Schmidt and our Chancellor Julie Bishop, who could not be here this evening. Auntie, thank you for that very kind welcome, and we are honoured to be on the beautiful lands of the Larrakia people. If I could reciprocate in Palawakani, which is the language of the peoples in northern Tasmania and Bass Strait Islands, Ya Palingina, Pankana, Ian Anderson, Palawa Truana, Palawa Latrowicha, Chawalawe Parabana Pamamarana, Kawatumata Mane Larrakia Tiana, Kanamina Nanena Nika Nanena. Thank you for tuning in elsewhere, but especially from Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, where ANU is located in Canberra. As many of the audience members may know, the partnership between Charles Darwin University and the Australian National University goes back about 2 decades. This year, we took steps to strengthen and deepen that partnership. This high-profile lecture series, which has been an ANU tradition, and a fitting tribute to Nugget Coombs, who was an instrumental leader in tertiary education and the wider policy landscape of Australia, is a very fitting way to acknowledge and recognise that deeper partnership. Nugget Coombs is remembered as a public sector leader in the post-war reconstruction of Australia. Professor Coombs was also a Chancellor of the Australian National University from 1968 to 1976. It was in fact during that time that the ANU Northern Australia Research Unit was established here in Darwin in 1973, and it's just around the corner. But Nugget was also an extraordinary and made a foundational impact in Indigenous affairs. He did this mostly after he retired. His legacy is very much with us today. He was appointed by Prime Minister Holt to chair the Council of Aboriginal Affairs after the 1967 referendum produced that extraordinary result that gave the Commonwealth the ability to legislate for Indigenous peoples. He often complained that many of those recommendations were ignored by Holt and McMahon, probably a pattern of advice around Indigenous issues that remains true to this day. He was a close advisor to Whitlam and in fact wrote the Indigenous Affairs policy platform for Gough Whitlam. He actually had an extraordinary legacy here in the Northern Territory. It was his advice around which the Northern Territory Land Rights Act came into being, although that was work of a later government that passed it, Malcolm Fraser. He founded the National Treaty Commission in 1979. So many of our policy ideas left a profound legacy, and we're still working through the ramification of that thinking around self-determination, community control, even in the contemporary world. He was a mentor to many emerging Indigenous leaders and university students. He would actually ask to see, when he went to a university, to speak with the university students. I remember him as quite an old man, a hilarious raconteur who loved a glass of red wine and could tell these extraordinary stories. His legacy is something that has come down through the years. So this is the 25th, we're approaching the 25th anniversary of the Nugget Coombs death in November 1997. And this partnership and lecture series is stronger than ever. And it's so lovely that we're here in the Northern Territory. It actually meant a lot to Nugget. The world of the Territory, the world of Indigenous Australia, and the issues around Indigenous policy, which are very dear to his heart. So tonight I want to share my congratulations to Harold Thomas, our esteemed guest this evening. The Commonwealth Government announced the Aboriginal flag copyright deal earlier this year, which allows the flag to be available and for public use. I'm sure I will speak for all ANU and Charles Darwin University students, faculty, staff and alumni here tonight, and also on the airwaves, when I state that I am especially glad to hear from him directly the journey of his creation along with his collaborators, Colin Golban and Crystal Dare. We live in challenging times that are alive to extreme risk, but also amazing opportunity, particularly in the field of Indigenous policy. And yet, the ability to use the flag is something that unites Indigenous Australia, and something which is such a wonderful gift. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Harold, for enabling us to do this, and it's such an extraordinary legacy in the Indigenous world. So I'll end my remarks to simply say I'm eager to hear from Thomas, Colin and Crystal this evening on the creation of the flag and its prominence as a very iconic symbol of Australia. Thank you again, Harold, for all you have done with your art and your voice, and thank you for being with us tonight. You have a very distinct place in our shared history within a country facing truth-telling and a reconciliation with our Indigenous past. So I look forward to hearing from your story this evening and seeing the flag's future unfold in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you to Professor Ian Anderson. It's a pleasure to have you join us here today. Every 2 years, the Nugget Coombs Memorial Lecture is delivered by a leading Indigenous Australian and provides an opportunity to discuss current issues faced by Australia's First Nations peoples to advance the community's understanding of these important issues. The inaugural HC Nugget Coombs North Australia Lecture was held in September of 1996, just a year before Professor Coombs' death, and was part of the ANU's 50th anniversary year public lecture series. It was delivered by then Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner Mick Dodson, and was entitled Assimilation versus Self-Determination. And I note today, 25 years later, we are celebrating ANU's 75th anniversary. The title of the 2022 Nugget Coombs Memorial Lecture is The History and Future of the Aboriginal Flag, and is co-delivered by artist Harold Thomas, Colin Golvan AM KC, and Crystal Dare, Special Counsel. This year's lecture will be delivered in conversation style to reflect the collaborative nature required between our speakers to negotiate the recent successful assignment of copyright of the Aboriginal flag to the Commonwealth of Australia. And now to our speakers. Harold Thomas is a world-class artist who graduated from the South Australian School of Art in 1969. As a young man, he was the first Aboriginal person employed in a state museum in South Australia, and soon after designed the Aboriginal flag. Over 50 years later, the image of the flag he created is now well known worldwide as a symbol of Australia. Its purchase in 2022 represents the highest price ever paid for an individual piece of Aboriginal art in Australia. Colin Golvan AM KC is an IP barrister at the Victorian Bar. He practices predominantly in intellectual property law and trade practices and has appeared in copyright, trademark, designs and patent cases, as well as competition and misleading conduct cases in the Federal and High Court of Australia. Colin has acted in numerous copyright infringement cases for Aboriginal artists. He represented Harold Thomas in his authorship dispute in the 1990s and in the recent assignment of copyright in the Aboriginal flag to the Commonwealth. He's a trustee of the Namatjira Legacy Trust and was also involved with the recent recovery of the copyright of Albert Namatjira. Colin will lead today's discussion. Crystal Dare, Special Counsel, has over 14 years of experience as an intellectual property litigator and advisor, specialising and having her personal passion in copyright, trademarks, misleading conduct, designs, domains and international issues in IP. Crystal works across different sectors, including the arts, technology, luxury goods, fashion and wine. Within the arts sector, Crystal also sits on the board of the peak body for art galleries in Victoria. Together with CDU's First Nations leadership team and CDU events team, it's our pleasure to partner with ANU on this important biennial event, and CDU looks forward to building on this significant legacy and relationship. So now to the presenters.
I just wanted to say what a privilege it is to be here, and to also thank Auntie B for such a warm welcome to Larrakia country. It's a great honour to be here speaking about such an important Indigenous issue. Before going into the story of this great flag which is rising behind us and across our nation, I just want to say a couple of things about Nugget Coombs. He, of course, was a phenomenally important figure in the reconstruction of Australia after the war, and I'm a child myself of refugee immigrants who wouldn't have come here but for the vision of Nugget and the political leadership of Australia at the time. And it's a great measure of how to run a country in a visionary way, to look back at the work that was done by Nugget in conjunction with government. There's a wonderful book about that achievement called Australia's Boldest Experiment by the wonderful historian Stuart McIntyre, which I highly recommend. Incidentally, Nugget was also involved in copyright matters. He was we got the one. That's it. Many of you will recognise this. It used to be a prime piece of Australian currency. Nugget introduced Aboriginal art to our currency. Unfortunately, he didn't get permission to reproduce the Aboriginal art on the note. He realised his error and ended up making due compensation to the artist in a collaborative and supportive way. But that's just a brief mention about Nugget and incidentally copyright. Now to the flag. I wanted to start with Harold, the story of the creation of the flag, and in particular, this creation is well set out in an important judgment which is noted in this slide, in which Justice Shepherd set out in comprehensive detail the story of the creation of the flag. Let me just set some legal ground first. In 1995, Paul Keating declared the Aboriginal flag to be a national flag of Australia. The only thing he didn't do was check with Harold, who happened to be the copyright owner. And as a result of which, Harold brought an action effectively for infringement of copyright, although there are Crown copyright issues. I don't need to go into that. But nevertheless, the Crown was exposed to a claim of copyright by Harold, which ended up being resolved in a proceeding in 1995, in judgment in 96. Just going on to the next slide, in 1995, there's the proclamation of the various flags, which is why we have the Aboriginal flag flown as a national flag of Australia. And then we come to the question of the creation of the flag. Now, if we go to the next slide. So that Harold has spoken a lot about the creation of the flag, and we have a unique opportunity here today to hear him speak about it personally. So can you tell us about the story of how this flag came to be created? No, just go ahead. You need to hold it up.
Is that right?
Hold up.
That way. Yeah, it's 50 years plus, and it's always been a cumbersome thing to talk about something you created as a young man or 24, where all your emotions are driven by, black rights and justice and all that at the time when the 10 MB was set up 6 months, 4 months later. So as a young man at the time, you're in the swirl of this activism, but at the same time, I was closely associated with, at my job at the South Australian Museum, with material Aboriginal culture, which was mainly Aboriginal art and craft. My job there was mainly disseminating the information about all sorts of items that are utilised by Aboriginal people. But I was still an artist myself. I'd still draw and paint at home, but go to work. And in the year of 1970, the first Aboriginal Day March, specify, the Aboriginal Day March. It wasn't called NAIDOC or anything, it was just a National Aboriginal Day March, one day only, and that was it. On that time of with my family, my artistic skills as portraying images, as I'd learned for 4 years at the art school, came to the fore, and I thought about, after the first mark, an image that represents us, I wasn't thinking about a flag per se, but as an image. And obviously, the thing would only be a banner or a flag at the march, because there was nothing in the first round of that march. We just had banners only, black, right, or whatever explanation or expletive we used. And we were supported by university students and even some old white ladies, surprising, back then, marching, and who also marched at those moratoriums against war in Vietnam. So it was that coupling of marches was significant for the Aboriginal flag, because we knew there were other people like-minded like us, particularly universities, unions and whoever, teachers, that came and marched on Aboriginal Day. The following year, it's a hard question to pinpoint the time exactly that I came up with this image. But artists are influenced. We're sensitive to lots of things that flow through our mind, and not only influenced by images, but by people's voice, by your background, your history. That all wells up in you. And fortunately, and you're just ripe from art school, you're ripe. You've got all this filled in your mind about expressing yourself in colour and design. So it was obvious for me, because of my Aboriginal background, my association with material Aboriginal cause at the museum, and being an activist, it was just the perfect pitch for a person. I'm not trying to pat you on the back, but it's, when you look back, those dots were all being placed in a line, and living with my Aboriginal family who received the prejudices and all that at home, all those sorts of things. So my brothers and sisters who are in the same world, that an image about ourselves, an identity expression. We are proud of who we are. We're proud we're black. We're proud of our black culture. That was significance. The term was called identity. Later on, a magazine called Identity came out, but that was probably 2 years later. But our identity as who we are as Aboriginal people, whether you live in the suburbs, whether you live down in Tasmania or in Arnhem Land or out in Broome, you're all the same. You're Aboriginal, and that was our concept in the minds of us young people. So the Aboriginal flag design was really literally done at home near my wife and my children. That I have to come up with some image, and the image that best portrayed, as my ancestors were, simple, make it easy to look at. So, and use colour. So those things just coming quickly. You just had to work it through as an artist. As art students, we adapt and are influenced, and we get on with one subject, we get on the next one, and we just keep motivating ourselves. Then you come up with the idea of what are we on about? We're on about our identity. We're on about our land. And the central focus was the land, because we were marching for land rights first, foremost. Because if you march for land rights, you march for identity. And it's easy to understand that point, that the whole exercise was for land rights. We were denied it. We didn't have the Land Right Act. We didn't have anything. We had nothing that belonged to us legally, or legally we did own it by our ancestry. But it was land rights. Then it was about the belief of ourselves, our identity. We're proud you're black. Don't be ashamed. Be proud. If people call your names, you're still proud you're black, or you're proud you're Aboriginal. We never said we were this tribe or that tribe, because we never uttered once in those first 2 years to say, oh, I'm a Aranda, a Lurija I'm from, or I'm a Larrakia, or I'm Illawarra mob, or I'm a person from any part of Australia. That was irrelevant. Your identity of your true self was irrelevant. It was you as identifying you as proud of your Aboriginal black identity. That was it. Later we picked this other stuff up of your ancestral, tribal. Actually, we did say tribe. We didn't even, that's all we said. We didn't say, oh, I'm from this particular group. I never said I was Lurija, or my grandfather was Wambai from the Gold Country. It was a unification of who we are, and every state spoke that way. when you marched in New South Wales, when you marched in Melbourne, when you marched in the West, you always said you're an Aboriginal, you're black. You never said you were particularly different, because in every part of Australia, we've got different ancestry from that are Aboriginal that have moved about. In particular, through the stolen generation, I was moved to South Australia. I'm not a Nugget. I'm not a Kaurna person. So that was the issue of your identity. You were in a state of being conscious of everyone, not yourself. We've gone to our selfishness of our own tribe. Before, we had a better unity than today, I think. See what I mean? This selfish stuff about ourselves makes us act and talk differently. I'm still that way. And so the identity of who we are through the Aboriginal flag, that the flag came out of expectation of all of us are the same experiences, and we have work to do to get on together. And that's the bottom line of Aboriginal flags, how it started. The land, the people's identity, and self-respect.
Okay, I wonder if we can talk a little bit about the flag as a design, because one of its unique attributes is how fetching it is as an art piece and how people just respond to it. Can you talk a bit about the work from an artist's perspective? You know, what were you trying to achieve by the design that you're making?
Well, because you're schooled in art, which is important. If I didn't go to art school, the flag wouldn't have existed in its way. So the flag wouldn't have existed in its way. It would have adopted the East Coast design, which was, if I can tell you quickly, that their flags from the Tent Embassy was black, yellow. What was the other one? I think it was red. I think it's red. Red, black, and yellow. No, it was black, green, and yellow. That was a flag they took to the Tent Embassy, and that's an outside foreign ideology, because it came through the Black Power movement in America, and it's a Pan-African flag that was raised, and the other flag associated was yellow and green with white stripes, white spears, right? That didn't work, and the story is about how that's another story, how the Aboriginal flag did sit finally as symbolising all Aboriginal people, the one that exists now. But with the colours I was expected to use was colours that are bright, vivid, and evocative. And the reason of myself reducing it to an abstract format with the design of two colours and a yellow and one colour in the middle was influenced by my association in the readings and learning of American abstraction.
And can we just look at some of that while we're chatting about it? So do you want to just go through a couple of slides? You're really talking about the work of Mark Rothko.
Yes. Mark, the immigrants from Russia and all those places, modern art wouldn't exist without the migrants from Europe that went to America. That's a fact. Other than Pablo Picasso, yes. But the wealth of the knowledge of the power of the immigrants that went to America made America better than it will ever be. It's because of those artists. And he's one of them, Rothko. He calls his painting fields of colour. Beautiful expression that it's all vast colours of orange, yellow, and those primary colours or secondary colours are effective for you to visually appreciate so much impact it can do. They began to teach us how to look at a piece of artwork. You don't have to look at the landscape. You don't have to look at a portrait. You can look at just one colour. And you can look at it, and it starts to soak you up. It becomes possessive, it takes hold of you. So if you've got colours in this sort of way, he's a colour theorist who's just magical. And it's the simplicity of these things, just the pureness of colour, the simplicity of design, and no word is spoken, because many of these paintings are called untitled. Untitled. So you title it yourself.
Now, we'll go to the next slide, and Harold can tell us what on earth this is.
Oh, this is the remnant of the flag. When I got my associate, a white lady, she was my associate in the museum, to put together the Aboriginal flag to be stitched together, on which I showed her, that the flag had the stitching of two red, black and yellow, red and yellow together. Then she had to cut the circle and put the yellow in the middle. And it's not perfect, but that was her commission from me. I never paid her for it, but I paid her for my love for her. That's more important. Her name's Lynn, and I just hope she's about. This is the remnant that she had, and during the court case?
Yeah, so this is actually this is all that remains of the first Aboriginal flag.
Then
the cutout of the
yeah.
middle.
Then I met her or something, and I requested her to take it to the South Australian Museum.
So it's in the collection of the
Yeah,
museum, and if we
yeah.
go to the next slide,
Yeah.
we can see the proud then Premier of South Australia and,
Yes.
and some other people admiring
The Kano people.
admiring what is
Yes,
really
yes.
a very important piece of Australian
It does.
heritage. It's all that remains of the first flag. And if we go to the next image, we'll see something of what happened to this first flag. It was taken to Canberra from Adelaide after the initial presentation of the flag at a demonstration in Adelaide. Harold, do you want to speak about this one?
Yes, well, when the flag was presented at the march, there was a very famous Aboriginal activist called Gary Foley. He was sort of heading the talks there, but it was the march was organised by a famous man by the John Moriarty. We all know him. He's from the Territory. He headed the march, and we ended up in South Victoria Square there. And I was running late. When I got there, Gary spoke, and then this is the place where the flag was first raised on Kano country. That's Victoria Square, Adelaide. Beautiful people, which I refer to them as the Nungas. I was called a Nunga then because I lived there as a child. So the flag was then taken after the Friday Day March to New South Wales. We went to the Tent Embassy, immediately hit. It was presented on the 26th of January, Australia Day. It came there just after, by the initiative of Gary Foley, to say we have something more special than the ones that are up there. It's us, and I'm proud of that man. He's a wonderful guy, and he's part of that struggle of the past. And that's Gary, and that's where the embassy first took hold of it.
If we go to the next slide, we might actually see the very first flag, because you'll see how there's a weighting of the red compared to the black. It might be reflective of the fact that in the very first flag there was a slightly more balanced position in favour of the red, incidentally, although it didn't represent the intended design. I just want to say something briefly about national flags. I'd like to talk a little bit about the future of our national flag, if we can, but just to look at a couple of classic examples of really highly regarded national flags. The next one. Not a surprise. Interestingly, that was a product of a competition. And the next slide show us the 15-member flag committee in 1964 reviewing options for the Canadian flag. Luckily, they chose the right one. And then the next one in our region, our brothers and sisters in New Zealand, this is obviously not their flag, but it's such a definite symbol of New Zealand. It doesn't take more than a moment to realise where that image comes from. And then we have the rise of our own Aboriginal flag. famously through Kathy Freeman at the 2000 Olympics. Bear in mind that only a few years prior at the Commonwealth Games, she was chastised for displaying the Aboriginal flag. How things have changed. Imagine an Indigenous athlete, or indeed any Australian athlete today, being other than supported totally by the presentation of the flag as part of our national imagery. And of course, the flag appears everywhere. It's ubiquitous. I think that's out of Redfern. It's sold in merchandise, more than it should be. And before we discuss the future of the flag, which is an important topic, I think, for conversation, I'd like to pass over to Crystal to talk about the whole episode of the assignment of the flag to the Commonwealth. Can we go to the next slide?
Thanks, Colin. And so, as per the introductions, I'm an IP special counsel at Cause, the law firm, and Cause acted pro bono for Harold for the last just over 2 years throughout the negotiations with the Commonwealth. And at that time, we were negotiating with the National Indigenous Australians Agency, NIAA, and they were represented by Clayton Utes. And so Harold and I first started speaking in around March 2020, and the conversations began about how to structure the transaction with the Commonwealth. And at the same time, there was a lot of discussion around in the public around what that transaction should look like, quantum, and who should hold the copyright as a result of the transaction. For example, whether it be the Commonwealth or a newly established body. And so in the second half of 2020, there was a Senate inquiry, and through the course of perhaps I think it was 3 weeks, there were various viewpoints ventilated about the flag, its history, its future, and then a set of recommendations which came out of that Senate inquiry. And so in the meantime, we were negotiating, I've just lost my papers, it doesn't matter, with the Commonwealth, and those were confidential negotiations. And one of the things that we spoke about was this as an artistic work and what that means from a copyright perspective. So there's a bundle of rights, and they include economic rights as well as moral rights. And one of the things that we were obviously very concerned to preserve is the integrity of the flag into the future, and so one of the things which was ultimately built into the transaction was a retention of moral rights by Harold and his estate, whereas those economic rights transferred to the Commonwealth. And so there were a number of licenses on foot in connection with the flag, and as a result of this deal, all but the Flag World license, those previously existing licenses were terminated. The Flag World license remains for production of flags, banners, bunting, pennants, but those royalties which the Commonwealth now received are directed by the Commonwealth to NAIDOC and its ongoing efforts. And there were a number of other public interest components of the deal which were important, including $2 million of the transaction amount being set aside for the Aboriginal Flag Foundation, and that you'll hear more from us about that, and we're very excited about what can be achieved insofar as Indigenous men's, women's and children's health through that foundation, which will shortly be established. And in addition, there's $100,000 per year, which the Commonwealth is allocating to opportunities for Indigenous people to acquire a formal education in furtherance of development of Indigenous governance and leadership. And so this document which you see here is the assignment deed, which is a public document, and at Minister at the time, Ken White's instigation, this document is part of our country's national archives and is an important part, I think, of our country's history, and it was important to us and at Colin's suggestion that we enshrine all the key tenets of the transaction, and including these several public interest dimensions in the recitals to this agreement, which, as I said, is a public document. And so it's an honour to be sitting next to this man and both of these two men here on this stage. And it was, for me, it's a once in a lifetime sort of transaction to be involved in, and an enduring friendship between Harold and I. Thanks, Colin.
Crystal and Cors did a fantastic job in looking after Harold's interests, all of which they did pro bono. I want to talk finally, before we open for questions, about the future of this critically important national symbol. Can I just go to the next slide? While we're discussing it with Harold, Harold's made some comments about the assignment that you can read on the screen. But Harold, what are we going to do? We all know what a significant day it's been in public life, and already there's conversation about the future of our country arising from these developments. There's agendas around republic, treaty, and there's no doubt the flag is going to play an increasingly important role. Can you sort of speak a bit about your own views about the future of the flag? Can it ever be the national flag of Australia? Can it be integrated with something else to be the national flag of Australia? How do you feel about it?
Well, they have ownership, but I'm not the only owner. So I've got ownership. Probably my sons own it more than I do, and my grandson will even own it more. That still have families now if they create something. But it's always been a shared responsibility over time. That it has its life without myself being present, obviously. That it has its life and it does its job. It has been doing its job for 50 years. Without all this haggle lately, it's been doing the job on its own in virtually where if you say it was free, it's always been free in the hearts of my tribe, my wife's tribe, my associated tribes, my people I've been amongst and struggle with their group. It's always been free. And the point of being free is the soul of it, the spiritualness of the flag. I don't have that ownership. It's my people's ownership. But the design of it is a different thing. It's about what the artist does, what he does with it. It gravitates to the artist because he's the one that created it.
Do you want it to be, can I put the question, the difficult but important question to you, which is, do you want it to be the national flag of Australia?
Honourable thing. But it'll be an honourable thing, but then it's about one tribal group. You see, this is the whole thing about, what about the rest of us? My tribe. If that's about the Aboriginal flag, my tribe must be affected because we are closely connected to one another geographically. No one has ever been isolated as Aboriginal people in this country because of our storylines and our connection as we live one another, right down to Tasmania, wherever. We are one group of people doing the same thing, but different articulation. That's all. It's a different articulation of language. Everything's the same. So the expression of the flag must say that from us. And if one individual has the honour, it looks selfish, and I'm more about inclusive of everybody. And the idea about New Australia, because New Australia is about Australia's doing the best country in the world dealing with social differences, ethnicity. People come and enjoy themselves better than any other country in the world. How many nationalities are in Australia since Nugget Coombs here, right? He had the vision, and respecting this old fella, I knew him once and I spoke to him once down at Waranga years ago, that the identity of the Australian flag is about, like I said, the identifier of Aboriginal people is the introspectiveness of who we are, not what people expect you to be, but how we see ourselves. And I think I've got it right with us. You know, it's easy to deal with my Aboriginal people. It's damn well hard to deal with white fellas, let alone other nationalities. But in the end, Australia is a very creative, smart group of people nationally, and they can get over this by coming up with something that's suitable. But I'm just suggesting that it has to be a symbol of simplicity, and you have to get the right colours. And yes, I find it very difficult to get further than 3 colours. To get 4 or 5, then it becomes the pride flag because it represents everybody. So you're going to have South African looking flag. There's 6 flag colours in that. They did it better than we have in Australia. South Africa, you know, I mean, great. From a place like that, they outsmarted us, you know. So we have to get it right because we espouse how great we are with our friendship and cleverness. But that flag, it's got to sing the right song, you know. That's it. It's got to sing it. It's got to. It's similar to that song we sing. They sing now, the new song, "We All Australia." It's got to match that, you know, and that could be the national anthem, maybe.
Look, they're very profound comments, Harold, and I just want to thank you as we conclude our yarn for being so open and generous in your comments today, and also being so wise in creating such an important national symbol, which brings pride to Australia at large, not just Indigenous people.
The thing with the flag now, it's like I said, it's moved on. It had its life of 50 years. Someone might say it's egregious and it's difficult to put on whites and others, but it's been part of. And what's helped it is the way of the new Aboriginal art format they're doing now with desert art and all sorts of expression. That's helped us because that allows the people who are not Aboriginal to understand who we are. We're bigger than what you think. We can absorb and do other things than just paint. But it's moving in a right direction of what you're saying is a new expression of Australian identity. And maybe this is unfortunately, a great lady had passed away. Unfortunately, this probably is the time to say, look, we're ready to say who we are, and no one tells us who we are. We'll tell who we are to ourselves first, then the rest of the world.
Thanks. Good place to finish up our.
Okay, thank you very much to our speakers. What we'd like to do now is go to the floor for our at the Casuarina campus. So Andy will handle some of the questions. So if you've got a question, can you put your hand up? Andy? And so for the benefit of the recording and our online audience, can you please speak into the microphone to ask the questions?
Okay. Thank you, and thank you everyone for such an interesting discussion, and loved listening to your explanation about the importance of the flag, Harold. And I have one of your paintings at home. I'm just wondering how the flag ended up with that clothing company. How did they get the rights to the flag, which created all that brouhaha a couple of years ago to make it accessible to all?
Well, it becomes a commercial position on ownership of your property. I own copyright. I'm exercising it from the court case that I've won. That part of your right to property is you can have it utilised in any way you want it, and it's commercial, right? And before I was interested in using it commercially, non-Aboriginals were exploiting it to the hilt. Non-Aboriginals were making millions off that image before I came to the party. Yeah, no one speaks of that. It's a haggle between blacks trying or one another. But the true history of that the format of the Aboriginal flag design expressed in flags and items was already operating long before I ushered a word. Occasionally people ring up and would you like to use And more often, Aboriginal people were the ones that were ringing up to say, "Hey, brother," they said, "can we use it?" "Yes, paint it on your buildings." I've done that over the years, allowing my families, my tribes, my associated people, my friends, anybody, white folks said, "Yes, go ahead." I was that easy about things because the flag gravitates a lot of people to be part of it because it's what it is. It's design. It's design. It's doing that. It's a kind of psychological thing. But it must be remembered that it was utilised well before I came to the party years later. Then, as is the case, that you have to go through the process of getting someone who can be a confidant in utilising it and selling it. So you draw up contracts, and contracts are often nasty. They're about exclusivity. And anybody want to do business with you, you have exclusivity. Therefore, you have the power to suck more money out of the commercial arena, and that's unfortunate. I sort of kind of half apologise for letting my people down, but Aboriginal were just using it wildly themselves. When you get some other Aboriginal people who have said, "Oh, we can't use it because a white company's got it." Just remember that you were using it freely and you didn't come to me. You get half the story when you get to the news. So I don't speak to them. I haven't spoken to the news from the very first time they were getting on television or on media and blabbering as much as they can, and you're all listening. No one came forward to protect the artist's right. Not one came out of the woods to say, "Harold, we're beside you. You're the artist. You own the copyright." And yet, I found one here in Darwin. He was a countryman from Tiwi. He was a Tiwi proper man. And I was getting out of the car up at Smith Street here in Darwin. And he would say, "Hey, brother." "Yes, Willie." And I saw, I knew him. And he said, "You know what they're jealous of?" He said, "They don't know the first thing about IP." This came from one of those people. The one you'd least expect where a white could control his art. But he said, they don't know about IP, which means intellectual property. That's what you have. Oh, Joe just hugged him. That's it. So you see, it's no excuse about not being and having the knowledge of what that is. Because when I went to the court to decide my position on the flag, all those haggling people who came after on social media and all that, not one of them came to the court case to express their interest of the flag. Not one. Only one person was Gary Foley. He was a representative, and the lady who stitched that design. But those people out there, the senators who gossiped, who haggled, they were not at the court case to express their interest. Because why? They didn't want to be Aboriginal. They didn't want to express themselves as Aboriginal, and they didn't care two hoots about the Aboriginal flag. That's the hard side of where my black active consciousness comes from. They weren't who they say they are today. They weren't then because they didn't express it. Now they're Aboriginal. Now they belong to a tribe. Before then, they steered away from the Aboriginal flag. Sorry about being hard on this, but this is in respect to the brothers and sisters who are not here to articulate their pride of being the activists. They're powerful.
Yeah, we've got time for, I think, one more question.
I was just going to say, it feels like there's a real feeling of abandonment there, and especially after you've created something that's so unified Aboriginal Australians.
Abandonment?
Of Aboriginal Australians, when you've created something that's unified so many people, it feels like, from what you're saying, that there was a real sense of abandonment.
Oh, yes. The thing is, the difficult thing about this is that it's done its job. You know, I just enjoy the growth of it over the years, and I enjoyed when it became part of the children's accoutrements and all that stuff. It's a beautiful sight to see. It was never even thought about. It's over there. It's not me. It's just growing. You know, it's like organic. It was just growing, and I enjoyed it all the years. But when people just use it as an excuse to place their identity in the forefront about themselves, see, it's not about myself. It's about my people's identity, because the depths of the Aboriginal flag, can I just say, it's about an introspection of who we are, not as a result of colonialism, not as a result of anything untoward or anything other than ourselves. So we have an identity for 40, 50,000 years, and that is expressed through all the sacredness and all the dance, song and dance, and the dreaming tracks. That's in the flag. That's my identity, and that's who we are. And that's it. It's very powerful to sense that. And if you're young, you didn't see it. But I've grown to understand what I did. You grow to understand. Did I do it? Because my son said, well, don't forget, Australian history of the 200 years is my history. My youngest son said, he said, the colonial history is my history because it's on my land. See? Colonial history is my history. Therefore, whole of Australia's history up to date is my history. Now it's a shared one. We are getting that way, and hopefully what we're talking about, Colin and others, that flag must say something close to that all our history, our black history, has ownership with the white people, and their history, politically and all that, is our history, right? And with the Boer War, it's all our history, black and white, Asian, Middle Eastern, it's all our history. Now, we're doing it better. We know how to live with one another, more or less, from different parts of the world. Polynesian history, especially. Okay. Sorry, I'm just wrapping on.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I'd just like to say thank you to Harold, Colin and Crystal for that illuminating discussion and for sharing your insights into the history and potential future of the Aboriginal flag. It's a national symbol of resilience, power and determination for so many. Thank you to our partners at ANU for bringing our speakers together and for all your effort to bring this important national discussion to us today. Thank you to Professor Ian Anderson and particularly Andrea Morris and her team from ANU for organising this event, together with CDU's First Nations leadership team and CDU events team. It's our pleasure to partner with ANU on this important biennial event, and CDU looks forward to building on this significant legacy and relationship. We make special mention that we are marking the 75th anniversary of the ANU this year and have ANU alumni joining us here today. So once again, can you please thank our speakers for this fascinating discussion?